All right. Whoops. See, this is what I get when I don't make sure things are working. Hello, everybody. I forgot to link these up to my actual Windows. So, I'm betting okay, PowerShell's working. And then preview's just a desktop. Okay. Sweet. All right. I forget every time I open OBS and go to stream, it needs me to tell it where Adam is, which is my editor I'm using. I hope everyone is having a great Thursday. I was ahead on work, so I decided to have a code stream because I've been meaning to do this for a while and haven't really had the time. Plus, a lot of the work I've been doing has been with configuration values and passwords and all that kind of stuff, and can't really do that on stream, unfortunately. Although really you didn't miss much, because over the last time I was working on this project, I probably ran about 40 different releases just trying to get the thing to work. So it was me just changing a value, queuing up a release, seeing if it worked, it failed, going back. It was a lot. But last time I streamed, I ran into the problem where I am trying to set up this project I'm working on to run in Kubernetes, but this project is a PHP project, and because I'm using a Docker MyBB image, which is a forum software, the PHP image, it runs on something called FastCGI, which it's hard to explain, and even I don't fully understand it, but it basically means your PHP is running on a separate worker from your server, where if you just host PHP directly from Apache, everything just runs on the same container. You don't have to worry about anything. But because this runs on FastCGI, it gives us some benefits. Not to go into too many details, but some security benefits and some performance benefits. Because I have to worry about that, I can't just run this container and be good with it. I have to run this container and my server container separately, and the two containers have to share the same files. I can do that in Docker pretty easily. The way I manage it in Docker Compose is I have these volumes set up where I basically say everything from my source file in my PHP container copy into the site volume, and everything in that site volume copy into my Nginx container. And this is in my local override because this is only for when I'm running through Docker Compose. This isn't when I build them and run them through Kubernetes. So when I'm running through Compose locally, this works fine. Not right now because I broke it, but typically in a local environment, this would work we'd get our files from our PHP image, share them to our Nginx, serve them. They would load the site. But when you work in Kubernetes, there really isn't the idea of sharing these volume mounts in a Kubernetes situation, because Kubernetes pods are meant to be very self-contained. So you aren't really meant to be able to share files across them. One pod can access a volume, like one service, I guess, can access a volume. But they don't really like it when you have multiple services reading and writing to the same volume. It gets very tricky. So it took me a long time to figure out how to solve this. And the way I discovered that you do this is through something called an NFS server. And this isn't something I had heard of before I got a ways down the Google rabbit hole. But apparently this is a concept that is pretty well known and well established in web environments. I don't know what the acronym stands for. I want to say it's like a network file share server or a network file server, and I'm just being redundant. But what this basically is it is a server that I'm running on my Kubernetes environment as a separate service. And what it does is it mounts up, and I use this image from Google containers, and all of this stuff was basically copied and pasted from other people who have implemented this, because these are pretty well-known ports for if you're wanting to implement one of these. But the main things are, I run this as a service in my cluster. I give it an IP address, and then within my Nginx, when I deploy it, right, I have a mount here, a volume mount, and it's named static files, which binds to the HTML. And then I give it the NFS server binding in the path. And what that'll do is that'll say, okay, anytime I want to access these files, I'm going to pull them from this NFS server. And the same thing with the, where's it at? Oh yeah, it's just at the root. Same thing with my application, right? I have a volume mount for static files. I mount it at a subdirectory, because if I want to add more sites, I can do that, and they'll all serve through the same Nginx server. And I give it a subpath. So this path is going to mount to this subpath within static files. So basically, what this NFS does is it binds to our persistent volume claim, which is this 10 gigabytes of storage. Really, I need to delete. I want to say this still has, did I see that right? Yeah. I still have this, and I don't think I'm using it. Yeah, so this can actually just be deleted, because we don't need it. Because that was when I was trying to bind it that way and failing. Yeah, so what's happening is, because you can only bind one service in Kubernetes to a volume mount, this NFS server is the only service that binds to our volume. And then both our application and our Nginx server communicate to the NFS server via these ports that it has revealed. Oh my god, I forget what the exposed. Revealed. Through these ports that it has exposed, and at this IP address, and they can basically put files there, pull files from there, I think asynchronously, like it doesn't really matter if they collide, and we can share that one volume mount with all of our different websites, which is amazing because if you know anything about providers, like I use DigitalOcean, they like to microcharge for things like volumes and Kubernetes clusters and databases and load balancers, and all of those are different charges. So I am paying individually for every volume, like shared storage block that I'm like, what's the term for it? Deploying, rolling out. And so those can add up. So that's why I made this one 10 gigabytes, was so that essentially I hopefully will not have to make another one of these persistent volume claims for a while. And this one hopefully won't fill up very fast because all it's really hosting is my static files from websites. The only problem is one of these websites is a forum system, so people can upload avatars and upload other things, and that might use up quite a bit of space, but I'm paying for 10 gigabytes and hopefully I won't have to increase that anytime soon. So yeah, that was exciting. It took me a surprising amount of time to solve because I kept trying to do it in more difficult ways, and it turns out it's not that complicated. I could show you the Git history, but it is ridiculous. I tried doing it via like multi-access volumes, but those don't really work the way you would think they work in Kubernetes. You can't have two services accessing them. It's only one service, but maybe like multiple pods in the service can write to it. I don't know. I didn't quite understand the logic behind why they have read-write many volumes, but you can't actually read-write many to them. If someone knows why that is, feel free to correct me and let me know why I'm wrong, but that just seems very counterintuitive. So yeah, it was just as easy as creating this NFS and then doing the IPs and binding to those. Now, Kubernetes, you should be able to give it, instead of giving it this IP, you should be able to, and I don't know why this doesn't work. I don't know if there's a bug in the way I have my clusters set up, or the way DigitalOcean is doing their IP resolving and like domain name resolution. But I had to give everything this cluster IP, and then I had to specifically call out those cluster IPs in my deploys, when really what I should be able to do is, I forget what the notation is. Yeah. So instead of doing these IPs, you should be able to use the name of the container. So I should be able to use nfs-server.default at that port. But it would not resolve the domain names. So I ended up having to switch everything over to IPs, which isn't ideal. And I think that's what broke my Docker, which I'm trying to fix right now, actually. I'm going through and I'm trying to set all my IP addresses based on what they are in the cluster, just so that I don't have to change those. But it's not really working out. I don't know if it's because there's a certain IP addresses I'm locked into locally. So that is one hurdle I haven't quite worked out. But for some reason, I was not able to get it to work using just the container names, which you should be able to do in Kubernetes, and which I was doing previously in Kubernetes just fine on my other applications, where they were able to, like, what's a good example? Ingress. The Ingress is a good example. Do I still have it in here? Yeah. So see here where the service name, like you can just give it the name and the port. You should be able to do that with the other things too, and it's just not working out correctly. I have a theory on that though. I'm wondering if it isn't because I created my Nginx on a different namespace. I didn't use the default namespace. And I'm wondering if it's not related to the fact that I'm crossing namespaces. And looking back, I don't think I need to do that. I don't think I need to create that on the same namespace as the Ingress Nginx, because this is another space where I got very confused because I don't know how Kubernetes works very well yet. But in Kubernetes, when you create your load balancer, you use this one of a few. So you have a few options for these Ingress classes. But I'm basically using a built-in Nginx Ingress that I installed using Helm on my Kubernetes cluster. And this isn't entirely ideal. I don't really like the way this works. I wish I could get around it, but I cannot figure out a way to get around this. Essentially, they're running Nginx on my cluster overall. And the load balancer is going through that Ingress Nginx level. And I'm telling that to send any requests to my own Nginx server. And I'm sure there's a way to not be redundant about this, but the problem I ran into was the fact that I need this image that I'm using for the basis of my Nginx server to have that volume mount. And there really isn't a way that I can tell where you can replace their server instance, whatever they have running, with your own that has your own volume mount. So I think it's just kind of set up where you have to have an Nginx server that directs you to an Nginx server that directs you to the application. And again, I could be wrong in that because this is all very new to me. But if you look at their documentation, like, that's what it seems to be. You can give it an Nginx configuration, customized. You can give it like different annotations in here, but you can't really give it an actual, backend implementation. And I'm gonna open up DigitalOcean if I can, just to see if I can illustrate that a little better. I don't know if I'll be able to, but so I'm gonna go into my Kubernetes dashboard. I'll pull up the window here in a minute. I'm always iffy about showing too much because, like, not that anyone watches these, but I'd rather not have this, like, messed with by people. And the internet. I love it. I absolutely love it. People who are hacking, keep doing what you do, but don't do it to my things. Okay. So I think maybe not, because I don't actually know what a controller is. So no, wait, here's pods. I might look at this later because I am curious now if I am creating redundant things, but I'm not actually seeing that happening. So basically what I'm looking at, let me pull it over to that. What I'm trying to see is, so I have my application container that's running. I have my MySQL container running. I have my Nginx container and my adminer container, which is like my graphical interface for my MySQL database, because I don't want to have to do SQL-based administration all the time. And then I have my NFS server, which is running, which should, I'm actually gonna, I don't know if I can, because I don't think that has a command line. Let's see. No, that doesn't actually have a command line in it. But one thing I could do, so, it does have a command line, my Nginx. Well, it should. Huh. I can never get this to work, but, it wouldn't, because, but it should, because I'm able to run command line scripts from my Nginx in Docker. So why am I not able to run command line scripts from the Kubernetes pod? Weird. Oh well. But yeah, I'm not seeing, like, it doesn't look like it's creating, multiple instances, because we have the controller, which I think is something different, and this is a webhook, which is also something different. So maybe this, default backend does stop it from creating its own service, which would be pretty cool if they did that. But either way, it's probably pretty lightweight, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. But, all right. So, these are always disclaimer for anyone joining now for the first time. If anyone is watching, I don't do any prep for these. I just kind of talk through what I feel like talking through. So, if it's a bit of a mess, that's why. But that's kind of what development is, right? It's trial and error, trying different things, running into a bunch of errors, trying other different things, seeing if it works, it doesn't, that sort of thing. But what I was trying to get working before I opened this up was my local. I'm trying to decide if I want to do that for a little bit before I hop off, or if I want to switch over to the actual projects I want to display. Because this site is fun to work on, but this is actually a site that I help run, and it's not really my project I'm working on for these streams. It's just been kind of a fun challenge with the whole NFS server issues. But now that I resolved that and got it mostly working outside of the whole Docker hates me at the moment issues, I might move over and start working on some of my previous site things again, because I really want to get started working on this project. And so I may switch gears because I feel like it. So my stream title is now a lie. We are leaving PHP land, staying in Kubernetes land, potentially leaving NFS server land, because I don't think I'll need it for these projects. Because while I love PHP, it was the first language I learned on. I adore it. A lot of people don't, but I am biased. I have been primarily working in Node.js for work and for other things for a long time, because when you work with React, it just makes sense kind of on the back end to go to Node.js. There's really no downside, especially if you're doing a lot of multi-page applications. It's just a lot quicker, a lot lighter weight. And you don't have to switch languages. Everything is JavaScript. Or in my case, everything is TypeScript. And it makes it really easy, very easy to work. But I don't know. I forget where I was going with that. So yeah, that's why I'm not using PHP for these side projects. I'm using Node.js because it works out better. And I'm actually trying out MongoDB for the first time, so that'll be a lot of fun. Maybe. I say that. It depends on how it is to work with. I have no idea, no experience. But yeah, so I think I'm going to switch over to doing that. And this is in a little bit of a state of disrepair right now. You'll notice that on both of these projects, I split them out. So I have all of my K8s sites, my portfolio site, which has its own deployment, its own compose that just builds this singular website in order to deploy it, and its own GitHub deployment workflow, which is how I've started deploying all of my websites, essentially, is by doing releases to GitHub and having this GitHub action, pick it up, build it, push the images to Docker, or to the, oh my gosh, GitHub Container Registry, which is their new thing that is free for now. And I'm really hoping it stays free because their thing is it's in beta, so it's free. So, word to the wise, if you start using the GitHub Container Registry, you might end up having to pay eventually because it's free while it's in beta. But I could see them charging for it. But I'm hoping they do like they do on Actions, where you get, I want to say 2,000 if you're a private, if you're like a non-premium member of GitHub. I want to say you get 2,000 minutes free on GitHub Actions per month. So I'm hoping the Container Registry will also give you like a certain amount of space for free. But I don't think they've worked out their billing yet. Not that I am, trying to sell you on anything. This is just tools that I'm comfortable with because I don't want to bind myself to DigitalOcean just in case I ever want to switch places where I deploy these to. And if I was pushing my containers to them and doing my deployments through them, I feel like it would be a lot more to update if I do switch. I'm a lot less likely to move away from GitHub than I am to move away from DigitalOcean one of these days. So that's kind of why I made that decision. But yeah, kind of where I was going with that was each of my websites has its own deployment. And then my tools folder has its own deployment where it basically goes in. And where is that? Oh, each one of the projects has its own. But essentially, right now, all I'm deploying for this project is my MongoDB instance because I don't need the Nginx when I'm not working locally. Because unlike PHP in FastCGI, most node servers have the ability to serve their own static files. There's no need to have a backend server behind it because the one container contains the entire website. So I am deploying that for my tools, whereas on my other website, I'm deploying MySQL from my tools, Nginx, my NFS server, which this K8s deploy is just anything that is only on Kubernetes and I don't need it, in Compose. And then my adminer. And the reason why I did that was anytime I release this project, it builds a new container with a new version for every single thing that is within this. So Nginx, MySQL, adminer, and not the K8s deploy because Kubernetes is smart enough to know if this configuration doesn't update, we don't need to put a new one. But all of these images get rebuilt and versioned, so all of these get redeployed anytime I do a release. And if I had this in the same folder as the website, anytime I released the website, I would be releasing MySQL, I'd be releasing Nginx, I'd be releasing adminer. There's no need for that. I'm never probably, post getting this up and running, I am very rarely, if ever, going to need to update these tools because they're set. I might need to version them, but that's about it. Whereas the website, I'm going to be developing on a lot. So I will be able to deploy just the website without anything else needing to happen. And that'll be nice. And these guys are going to work the same way, where when I deploy my portfolio website, which is megstar.com, which I need to put in my Twitch. If I don't have it in my Twitch, I need to. But yeah, it's basically, it'll only do this website. So anytime I need to update my portfolio, I'm not deploying, these other projects I'm working on and my MongoDB and whatever else I add to this. And I'm imagining this folder will eventually have things like Grafana, if I decide to add monitoring, which I really want to do, and any kind of logging container that I want to add. I want to play with adding a separate service that I send logs to from any of my applications, because we're looking to do that at work, and I want to see how it would work locally before I really push for that project at work. Because we have a couple of different web applications that we want to record logs from whenever client errors happen, and it'd be nice to be able to send to a centralized service that then records it using the processes that we have in place put there by DevOps to record logs. Because we don't really have you'll find that real-time user monitoring tools through things like Datadog or Sentry or New Relic are really expensive. And based on the amount of traffic hitting your website, so when you have a highly trafficked website, it's like a cost trade-off between whether you record your own logs or you let someone else handle it for you. And we are kind of choosing to record our own logs. So I want to try that out, and that'll go in here. And there will be a couple of other things that'll probably go in here. But yeah, so I'm going to switch. Although I do want to talk about one more thing that's kind of fun. I don't know if anyone is interested in MyBB, but this is a very application-specific tidbit, but I wanted to share it because it's funny. So, MyBB, very, very well-intentioned. They probably are not thinking in terms of how developers work. I don't know. But they introduced this Docker container, which is wonderful. But there's two things about this Docker container that are terrible. One thing, I have a bug open with them that I'm hoping they'll fix. They said they were going to open a PR, but this was 2 months ago, so I might fork and open a PR for them. But essentially, every time they redo the image, let me actually pull that up. Because I have it called out in the actual issue. So MyBB provides you the ability to override certain files. Let me switch. So when you create a forum using MyBB, they give you this languages folder, which contains all of the language for your forum. And it gives you a few different language options so that when you switch languages, it switches for you and you have multiple translations of your site, which is awesome. But if you want to override something in this languages or something in this config, they don't let you do that using their Docker the way it is. So what happens is you write your volumes to the site container, right? And within here, it goes through and it copies the entire MyBB foreign system into your container. And actually, let me look. Maybe they did add it. -K. No, they didn't. So basically, they copy the entire MyBB forum system into your website, which is fine, except for when they copy the entire MyBB system into your website, all of your language updates get removed, all of your config updates get removed, and your plugins stay because they expect you to add those. But they have a very defined way that they expect you to set these config values, which works when you're using the forum on shared hosting. But when you're deploying via Docker, it doesn't work so well, because for me, right, I have my config set up to use environment variables, because that's how I have to do my MySQL credentials. I'm not going to put my flat out MySQL password into this file. It's not going to happen. And the same with, the host name, the username, the password, all that stuff. Like, it needs to be environment files. But every time I put it up there, these values get overwritten by empty, I want to say. And so what happens is I get a screen like this that says, hey, you have to set this forum up because you haven't set it up yet. And the reason why this is a problem, right, is because if I'm trying to deploy an update to my forum, say I want to fix a bug in one of my plugins or add a new plugin, I make the change, I release it, it deploys the update, it spins up a new Kubernetes container, and everyone who's visiting the site sees this. Because if you hit the site after this goes, this is what you gotta see. So I was able to fix this locally by adding this script, this refresh, that will run. It doesn't fix the config overwrite. I want to say I fixed that a different way, and I don't remember how I fixed that. But what this does is it essentially goes through and makes a bunch of the updates that normally that forum installation wizard would make for you. That the new version of MyBB that you are copying over on all your files doesn't do. So it installs this lock file. It creates this lock file that basically says we are running the same version that we were before. It's fine. That's only going to be a problem, and I'll probably have to comment this out anytime I upgrade the forum, which I'm going to have to remember to do. I might make that cleaner at some point. So this might be something that I suggest to them, that I look a little deeper into, and suggest to them as part of their Docker container, because this should not be something that people have to figure out themselves. Anytime they want to recreate their Docker container, you shouldn't have to reinstall your entire forum, essentially, because that breaks continuous integration, releasing, essentially. But we check the database connection, which we have to do in a loop because Docker and Kubernetes sometimes doesn't let you wait to see if the MySQL is running, which is actually kind of also another thing that's failing on my current, and that might actually be why I'm seeing errors. And then it runs all this cache updates and all of the theme updates. So that was kind of a fun challenge, and if you ever plan on using MyBB, or, writing your own Docker container, it's just something to keep in mind, that you should probably make it to where people can run your container without having to completely reinstall everything and go through a process that basically I feel like you should be able to run a new version of a Docker container if you choose to, and not have any interruption to what the user's seeing on the other side of the website. Because otherwise there's really no point in using this container for Kubernetes. Because the whole point of Kubernetes is to do releases with no interruption. So yeah, that's kind of fun. But switching gears away from PHP land, this project, this Tech of Many project, is probably going to be the focus of all of my streams going forward. I'm not going to have too much time probably to work on it because I need to clean my house tonight, but I'll take till 7 probably. But what this is going to be, I can't remember if I've gone over this before or not in these, but this is going to be a kind of like a WordPress Squarespace replacement for people who want to build their own website, know enough to know how to, get hosting, get a domain name, spin up a server, a node server, on an endpoint, and have your traffic hit that. So it's going to be for people who know about development or want to learn development, but don't want to go through the process of building their own user sign-in, building their own registration, building their own integrations to things like Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, Shopify, all these different basically plugins that you can get for WordPress, but the ones that are very common to small business creators. And I want to provide a way to allow people to have Patreon benefits through their website, have a shop through their website, have a blog, have users and mailing lists, and integrate those users and allow them to connect their Patreon to get their benefits. And down the line have YouTube and Twitch integrations also, kind of in one place, that are all optional. You can implement them, but at the same time, it's not you're adding a bunch of pieces that other people have written and hoping they work together and hoping they work the way you want them. It is, here's what you get. You have these utilities. You can make them look however you want to on your website, but the functionality is here for you to use. So, because one of the things I found about both WordPress and Squarespace, that if you are a developer, they're a nightmare. Depending on what areas of WordPress you get into. There's very little moderation over plugins, with good reason. They let anybody contribute, which is fine. But you run into big performance concerns and security concerns, and it's too big and too WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. So if you want to go in and clean it up or customize it, it's a lot of work. You almost have to just write your own plugins, which I don't know. Squarespace, on the other hand, it's very nice if you just want to create like a portfolio website, or you have what you want to do fits very well into what they give you to do. But Squarespace gives you no access to their backend server. So all you have to work with is essentially like the front end, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So if you want to do anything with Patreon, you can't. Because Patreon gives you a private key, and you do not want to make that public. You do not want to put that in your JavaScript. You do not want to put that in your front-end code at all, because if somebody gets that, they have access to all, your entire Patreon, essentially. They can modify things. They can do things. It's really bad. Whereas if I provide something that gives you a server side, what you do is you set up API endpoints that you communicate with using a token. This website is the only website that can communicate to this endpoint, and I have to be logged in to do it. And then it does the checking and says, okay, you can modify your own Patreon. So we're going to use the token that's stored on the back end that nobody can see if they don't have access. And we're going to, do these Patreon modifications for you. And YouTube, you can get away with because they have different API endpoints that require different kinds of keys, which is pretty neat. So if you want to retrieve videos, you don't have to have a secure key. But if you want to delete your own videos, you got to have a secure key for obvious reasons. So basically, if I want to allow any kind of cross-platform communication within authenticated channels, this feels like the best way to do it. Because it might be unfair to WordPress, but I'm very biased against WordPress. It's very heavy. And as far as I can tell, there's not really anything like this out there. So I figured I would have fun writing it and see if people want to use it. But enough talking. Let's I'm gonna exit out of my current Docker because we're not gonna use that in clear. Well, I'm gonna cd into K8s tech of many and then clear. All right, so I have my command line, right? And originally when I set up this project, I actually need to do some cleanup before we do this. Originally when I set up this project, I was going to use Express. Oh, I didn't even start. Ha! Did I already clean up? Hilarious. Oh, right, I started on this. Cool. Okay, even better. I don't have to do any cleanup. Okay, so, scratch that. When I started on this website, I was going to use Express, but I've decided against that because at work, we're going to start looking at Next.js. And the way Next.js is set up, I think is a little more intuitive for people to figure out, because they legitimately have a pages directory for their routes, whereas if you look at Express, the way Express does their routes is you have to add them via these getters as middleware, which isn't super intuitive. It's nice if you're really building a developer heavy website. There's nothing wrong with it. But because I'm kind of aiming this at people who are trying to learn how to code or people who might not be entirely familiar with the way Node works, I feel like that could get real complicated. Whereas if I use Next.js, I'll actually show you because I'm about to install it. It will be a lot more intuitive for people, I think, to figure out. So I'm gonna look at, if I go to Google and I look at this looks promising, right? So I want to look at how to create a website using Next. So yeah, see, page-based routing system with support for dynamic routes, which is great because I'm going to need APIs. So in our setup, we are going to install an npx. That's fancy. I use npm, so I don't know that there's even a difference between the two, but yeah. So basically, you install it, and then you run create next app, it looks like. Weird. So you don't have to, that seems fishy. It feels like you should have to install create next app globally. So maybe they just skipped that step. I'm gonna see if this will work. So we're gonna go in using our command line. And we are going to, yeah, we're just going to create it in a subdirectory here, and then I'm going to pull the files up a directory because I want it in this root, right? I don't want it within, because I like the package.json being in the root, but at the same time, like, yeah. So I'm going to basically create it within this directory and then pull the files up a level. So I'm going to paste this. I wonder if learn starter is the leanest. Actually, you know what, let's try npx just to see. Oh, look at that, it did work. I wonder if npx is like a special command. I've never heard of that. Normally what you used to have to do, I feel like, is you had to use npm to install create next app as like a global script and then run create next app via npm. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so now we have our Next.js blog, which I don't know that we're going to need everything that's in this, but it gives us a good starting point. We might. So I'm going to take the node modules, copy them up, kind of similar to how I have, you know, up here. Which I don't know that I actually do have my node modules up there because I have reorganized this so much. Take the pages, put it up here. I'm gonna get rid of source because I don't think I need it. Because that was from when I had everything kind of in one place, and I don't think I want that anymore. Just because Oh, that's why I have it. No, because when we go to TypeScript, we will build to a dist. And that'll be fine. Okay. So basically the thinking is putting everything in one single directory makes it very easy to copy everything you want into your Docker container without getting any of the stuff we don't want. But when we go to TypeScript, I'll be building everything into a subfolder anyway, and we won't have to worry about it. We'll build it into something that is git ignored and then, put it up. So that's fine. All right, cool. So we have this public folder that can go up to. We have the git ignore, which actually for this, I probably, this is for, you know what, I'm just gonna copy this one and paste it over everything in here because I trust them. This is basically what GitHub gives you by default when you say you want to start a JavaScript project. But using Next.js's for a Next.js project makes a lot of sense. Oh my god, every time. I do that every time. I'm going to forget every time that the command line is up there. Sorry about that. One of these days I'm going to have actual, numbers of people watching this, maybe. And they're going to be yelling at me, and I'm going to be in the zone, and it'll be 30 minutes later, and I'll be like, oh yeah, you saw none of this. Wow. Okay. And this package.json. So it looks like they have their own build and start script, which I don't love, but it's alright. I don't know, there's something fun about having to write your own scripts. Frameworks are great, but there's a part of me that's tempted to just go, no, I'm writing my own. But I'm not going to do that. So I had this called Tech of Many. And yeah, we'll call it version 1. Why not? So we're using Next, React, and React DOM. So that's kind of nice that they're very closely tied into React. And really what Next gives you, which is really nice from a standpoint of SEO, and another reason why I want to use them for this project in particular is because creators care about SEO. If you're running a small business, you really want to show up on people's Google results. So what Next.js gives you is, we don't need the package lock because it'll recreate that for us. So I can delete this. It basically gives you server-side rendering with React, which is something that was a big problem for a long time. At work, I had to solve that problem, and it was a mess. But Next.js just gives it to you. So they essentially give you a website that on a normal React website, if you are pure React and nothing else, if you right-click on the page and say view page source, you're not going to see any of the content in there because everything is loaded via JavaScript. None of it is actually HTML content. when all of it is populated from your JavaScript, like scripts. What server-side React gives you is you're sending all of your content on the initial page load as server HTML. But you're also going back in and connecting up the JavaScript so you get the same benefits of a single page application. But when you just load the page initially, your HTML doesn't know that you have a single page application. And one of the benefits of that, although I don't think it matters as much anymore because Google's gotten better about handling JavaScript, is then your like Google crawlers, all of your bots from your different search engines can see your website. And they know, okay, this was, this is all the content on this web page. I'm going to index it in the search engine. Rather than, this is an empty page. I don't know what to do with this. Page. This is an empty page. I don't know what to do with this. So yeah. Alright, so this is looks like our index page that we start out with. So let's see if this works. Let's see if the starter kicks off. I was curious. It looks like... Okay. So it looks like your head from next is what creates your metadata. So your website title and your website icon, which is great. I love that. Because it's a lot more complicated if you use Express 2, because you have to wire it up using Helmet. You don't get all that involved. That makes it a lot easier for someone to onboard on this. So we have our head, we have our main, and we have our styles, which are, it looks like inline. Interesting. So they want you to use, I forget what this is called. Is this CSS modules? That I'm gonna have to look into. I don't know if I want to do that. I might use Sass. We'll see. I'll try it their way. I always like to try it their way first and then go off the rails and do something completely different. Okay, so we've got our page. We've got our package JSON with our scripts. And we've got all of our stuff. So now if I go command line and I go npm start, which was the command that they listed, it should. Oh, it didn't. Why? Oh. Huh. Okay. Well, let's look at what their scripts are then. What do they expect you to use? Dev. Okay. Well, you know what I'm going to do right now? Yeah. So I will mess this up every time if I make myself do that as two separate calls, so it's real easy if you just combine it into one like that. So, okay. Now we're gonna run, we'll do dev first. No? Oh. Oh. Okay. For some reason, start is one of those things that you can use without a initial, but anything else you run, you have to do the run in front of it. All right, let's see. So if I go to, usually it's on 3000. So on 3000 we have our next step. Cool. Easy peasy. Now the question. The big question. The next question I'm gonna solve. How do I use TypeScript? Oh. So you just create it and you run it and it sets it up. Very nice. You know, they think of everything. Okay, so what we should be able to do, according to them, is we should be able to stop this. Yes. We should be able to just create an empty. I'll use touch, why not? Oh, why not? Because I'm in Windows. Yep, okay. That must not be one that Windows has aliased, which is too bad. So I'm gonna go back to this. Create an empty. Oh, that is not in the right spot. tsconfig.json in here. And then, if I go back to my command, it should fill that in for me. We should see it fill in. Unless it can't. Okay, so it doesn't do it for you, it yells at you to do it. npm install save dev TypeScript types React. And yeah, we do want that in dev because if you install it in prod, what they expect you to do is they expect you to build all of this and then basically just push the finished code up to your production build. But the way I'm doing it using containers, really, like, you end up just installing everything anyway, because in order for your containers to build the code, they have to install the code. Okay, so added npm run dev. Huh. What? Interesting. This makes no sense. Now, what might have happened, let's just try deleting this. Let's try and then let's try it again. Yeah, okay. So my package.json didn't recreate correctly. That's what that was. So I had to delete it and let it recreate itself. Very strange. Okay, so the application still works. So now what should be able to happen is in here, yeah, see here? So what it's doing is it's taking all of this and it is building all of our code into this .next folder. So when we deploy all this, we're going to want to make sure that this .next folder gets deployed, because that's where all of this is. So oh my goodness, I'm only going to notice it when it moves. Okay, so if I go into tsconfig.json, yeah, see, they set the target TS5. They set it to build to, where did they set it to build to? Oh, right here. I bet it's in here. No. Oh, this is outdated syntax. I wonder why they're doing that. You shouldn't have to use this. So it's a little strange. Normally, there's a new way, I want to say, to do types, but I could be wrong. Maybe that's the correct way to do it for a package. But I'm pretty sure if you use certain like linting rules, it'll yell at you and say that this tag syntax for including types is deprecated. But we can worry about that later because they set that up and we're doing it their way. So they didn't tell you where they're building to, which I don't love. Because the thing about some of these libraries is they hide stuff like that, and I like to see stuff like that. Because normally, which I think this is because we're using their script and we're not using TSC, I can show you a counter example. So you see how here, it's very clear. Because I'm using TSC to build, in my tsconfig I have out directory. This is where our files are building to. Base URL. This is where our files are coming from. Paths, which that was because I was trying something and it didn't work. So normally you wouldn't need that. But it's very clear like where things are going and where things are coming from. Whereas in here, there's really nowhere to change this .next directory that I can see, which is kind of not annoying, but not great. Because if I wanted to, I couldn't. But then again, that gives them a lot of freedom to do stuff, so I understand why they're doing it that way. I just, when a library like starts doing a lot of the configuration under the hood, I get a little nervous because I always seem to run into cases where I'm gonna need that directory to be a different name. I don't know why, but I assure you it's probably gonna happen, and I'm not gonna be able to rename it. And Next.js just isn't going to work for me, but hopefully not. We're going to see. We're going to keep going. We ran into that a lot at work with Create React App, where just Create React App did not work for us. And we tried, and whew, it was bad. Okay, so we have this in TypeScript, so what I should be able to do is I should be able to rename this. .tsx. It still is the same. For those of you who don't know TypeScript, TSX is anything that has this JSX style code in it. which I had to set up in mine, but I don't think they have set up in this. Do they? Oh, they have it in preserve. I want to say in mine I had it different. Oh, maybe not. Never mind. Ignore me. But yeah, anything .tsx has that. If I just name this .ts, I want to say it'll probably yell at me. Yeah, see how immediately it has issues with all of this? So you want to make sure anything in TypeScript that has Markdown is TSX. So we rename that .tsx. And I want to say that's probably all we need, which is weird for me. I might have already run into a problem with this. I'm going to have to see. Because it looks like from here, I'm going to do a little looking. So it looks like they build your server for you. Using next, like that next command runs the server for you, which is fine as long as you don't want to do anything within that server running. But I can guarantee you I'm going to want metrics on that server. And I'm going to want error reporting on that server. And so I'm betting there's a way to put your own custom server. Let's look. So if I go in their docs and I go into deployment, no. Advanced features, I bet. Custom server, look at that. Yeah, see, by default they can include their own server. You can still use your existing backend, which is sweet. So none of this makes any sense to me right now, but this looks familiar. It's similar to how Express does it. You create a server and you give it each of these. So it looks like this create server takes this, which is your middleware, and runs the render, which I would probably want to keep. I'd probably actually just keep their handle because I don't need any specific path name logic right now that I can think of. Except for maybe API requests. There might be an instance where, like, for API requests, I want to check the token on everyone or have some kind of, like, secure middleware. And then on this listen call, it looks like we can add error handling. So, perfect. I'm not going to worry about that right now because that'll come later, but that's good to know. And same with some of these other things. So, like, custom app is probably, persisting layout between page changes, which we're going to want to do because if you have a header that doesn't change through your entire website, you don't need to re-render that every single page change. That doesn't need to happen. So we're definitely going to be using that pretty much right away. And cool. So Next.js it is. And legitimately, me looking at this is the first time I've ever looked at Next.js. Outside of knowing that it does pages in Pages. That was the only thing I knew about this library. And the reason why people use it, which is the server-side rendering. So it's really nice when a website like this has their docs set up super nicely, because it makes it very easy to find this stuff. So real quick, I think I'm going to create this custom app just because why not? And just see if it works. So in our code, wow, I didn't switch the entire time. Well, let's go back so you can see what I was looking at when I was talking. This is the custom app so that you can override your your layout. And then this is that custom server I was talking about, where they have the K8s server. It takes your middleware, and you can either do stuff with custom paths, or you can just pass through to the handler, which I'll probably do. And then we have this error handling here, which will be nice. So I will probably definitely use this eventually, but not yet. And it looks like you just, to override it, oh, it removes automatic static optimization though. That's not good. I'll have to look through that, because I don't know what that gives me, but I might see if I can get around this. Maybe they offer functionality around logging and around, you know, stuff like that, because if they do, that would be better. But if they don't, well, measuring performance. Okay, report web vitals. Render. No, they don't. Oh, come on now. Yeah. That's... Sometimes these... When they build the backend for you, they tend to assume that you don't want anything with the backend. Like, you don't want anything to do with it. And that isn't the case, because I really, really, really would love to have reporting on performance for different routes, which it does not seem like they offer. So I might have to override their server, but like I said, that can come later. Right now, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to, before I hop off, because I'm a little over what I wanted to be, I'm just gonna, for fun, implement a quick custom causing every page in your app to be server-side rendered. Oh. Yeah, so this is if your website, basically like ours, if in your header you show user information and you want that to block the page load, which you shouldn't because users aren't SEO. But if you like have SEO specific data in your header where you're like, I want to show this before the page loads, you would add that in here. which we have on my work site because we're a real estate website, so we really care about that. Some pages might have that on this, like store pages, storefronts. So if you have a shop, you probably want to load your shop inventory before the page loads so that when Google crawls it, they get your products. But other than that, most of it's probably going to be just built-in stuff that we don't have to worry about. So, okay. So let's create. They said to create it in pages as _app dot. Let's see if this works. TSX. It should. So if I do this, right, and I just create. Interesting. Okay. So what I think is happening here, if you know React, normally what my app would be a component. And a component would take children and it would put children in here. But it seems like they pass the page component to this component rather than passing it in as children. So what I think I would do, if I wanted to have any kind of layout, I think what I would do is I would say header. Oh. You'll find I'm picky about the way I do these things now after working at work for so long. Okay, so we're gonna do a JSX empty block. We're gonna do a header with some header. We're gonna do our component. We're gonna do a footer with some footer. And we're gonna do a end tag. I wonder why this isn't auto-indenting. And I have some extension enabled right now. Okay, and I'm gonna get rid of this because I can look at that later if I feel like it, but right now it's just a lot of noise. Okay, so now, and what I'll eventually do, because this is nice, but this isn't how we want to set up an actual website in React. What you do is you'd create like an outside directory that would have all your components, and you'd import these components and call them like normal. But now if I go back, oh, it looks like it compiled automatically. So it does have code watch. Well, maybe. Huh. You know, I bet, because if you look, I don't see my some header, some footer anywhere. And in the body, I don't see, you know, I see their footer, I don't see mine. So what I'm betting is I have to restart it because we added a file and they need to know that that file was added in order to override. So if I go back, yeah, see, there we go. Some header, some footer. So that'll let us, no matter what page we go to, which we don't have any internal routing yet, these will never reload because we have instead this component can change without these needing to, which is nice, especially if you have or did need to use that global, data fetch. Then you're not fetching your data every single time you load a new page, which defeats the whole purpose of a single page application. All right. That's basically all that I wanted to go through today. I've been notoriously bad about switching views today. I will get better as I do these more frequently. I do want to start doing these again because this is a project that I'm really excited about. Not only because it's going to let me learn things for work, but also because it just, I don't know, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So I hope to have another one soon, where I can start kind of working on some of these other parts of it. Because basically what I'm going to do initially is I'm going to start building the Tech of Many website for this library in the library as I'm writing it. So probably the first thing I'll work on, which I actually started working on it already within here. No, within here. But I'm probably going to just restart because there's a lot of complications with doing it in an external repository. So what I want to do is I want to get version 1 working within basically a library folder here, which is why that folder existed when we first started. And I'll have my different storage, user, blog, whatever else I feel like creating portions in here. But I won't have to worry about building them from a separate directory, especially when I get to the point of deploying to Docker, until it's actually a finished project. And then maybe I'll move it to a separate repo before I make it like an NPM library. But yeah, that's kind of the goal. I want to make this kind of an NPM library that you can create it using a create script. It'll give you a basic skeleton of a website with some things like log in, log out, header, footer, different forms and stuff that you can customize pretty easily. And all the functionality that you would need to add things like a blog, all that stuff. And potentially scripts to do that. I haven't decided yet, so that'll be a fun decision that I will have to make. All right. Yeah, and if you're at all interested in this, let me know. Either send me a message or shoot me something, because I would like to open source this at some point. It'll never be paid. It's never going to be a product. I might make a Patreon if people want to chuck some money at me for like hosting it, maintaining it, but other than that, I just feel like, I don't know, when you're a creator, you have enough to worry about. You shouldn't have to worry about, like, you're already going to have to pay to host your website. You shouldn't have to pay to build it. Especially if you're wanting to learn. So that's kind of where I stand on that. I love open source. Even though I totally totally valid if you want to get paid for your open source work. I'm not knocking that, but I will not do it because I can't promise a product, first off. And second off, I know too many creators, so it'd be cool to be able to give them this. Alright, that is it, but next time I'll probably get into actually starting to build this library, and this thing will be titled correctly as JavaScript, Node, whatever. But until next time, thanks for joining, thanks for watching if you're watching this after, and sorry about my screens. I'm gonna make a note and put it on my desktop. Have a good rest of your night and have a good weekend. See ya!